Welcome everyone to another episode of Retro Wrestling Reviews. Fredo Esparza here, and this week we look back at World Class Championship Wrestling's April 17th, 1982 show. Before we get to the review, be sure to click that subscribe button. We'll have more wrestling show reviews as well as the Lucha World podcast and other content available on this channel. This episode of World Class was taped at the Sportatorium in Dallas, Texas, and aired on April 17, 1982. Actually, they didn't have a specific date of when this show happened. I think it was early April. Mark Lawrence is on commentary. He mentions early on that they will show a tape featuring Fritz Von Erich and the Great Kabuki. The first match on the show is Black Gordman beating Sal Olivares after getting him with the DDT, and then he wraps up Olivares' arms and takes him down to the mat for submission. Olivares gets in some offense throughout the match, as that gives Gordman time to yell at the fans and gets him more heat, with the crowd really hating him. There were a lot of punches thrown by Gordman, and whenever he could, he'd just keep yelling to the fans to shut up. Gordman's DDT at the time was referred to as a diamond twist, and what was interesting was Jake Roberts had started using the DDT in his matches at this time as well. Both of them weren't using them as finishers, but more as a move to set up a finisher. In Roberts' case, it was him using that DDT, but then his finisher was always like the knee lift, similar to Mr. Wrestling 2. Gordman, I think he just used a variety of finishers. It wasn't just the DDT at that point. The fans booed Gordman after he won. Gordman really got a lot of heat. That was then followed by Mark Lawrence interviewing referee David Manning. He talked about the difference between refereeing amateur and professional wrestling. Manning said, at the professional level, there are some wrestlers who will do things to distract the referee to cheat to win. Manning said, the NWA has certain rules that referees must follow. He mentions that there are times that he suggests special rules for certain matches or for certain wrestlers. That was then followed by a match between Al Madril beating Carlos Zapata with a crossbody block off the top rope for the pin. Madril used a lot of punches throughout his match. Zapata does a lot of dirty spots like chops and choking on Madril, which also led to a few warnings from the referee. Madril is able to make comebacks on Zapata every time he was in trouble, which led to him being able to get the win with the crossbody block off the top rope. Next match after that was Kevin Von Erich beating Wild Bill Irwin with a sunset flip off the middle rope for the pin. Kevin was getting mobbed by the girls as he entered the ring, and actually a few of them even kissed him. Poor guy. Irwin controlled the early action. Fans started to chant Chauncey at him, which is his middle name. I think it's his middle name, or his actual name was Chauncey. I think every time they've called him Chauncey. I've brought this up on various reviews, how that's the name they would call Irwin. Kevin gets Irwin in a sleeper hold, but Irwin escapes by knocking Kevin off when he drives him into the turnbuckles. Kevin Von Erich recovers and uses his legs in an attempt to get Irwin to submit. Some punches are exchanged late in the match. Kevin goes for the iron claw, but Irwin reaches the ropes. Kevin again goes for the claw, but Irwin blocks it. However, Kevin goes for the claw on Irwin's midsection. Irwin's able to throw Kevin off him. Irwin slams Kevin and misses a dive off the middle rope. Kevin then climbs to the middle rope and then does a dive off and grabs hold of Irwin with a sunset flip for the pin. That's then followed by Mark Lawrence interviewing Kevin Von Erich after he won. Kevin said he learned his finishing move from his father, Fritz Von Erich, and that's basically the end of the interview. That's then followed by a taped interview with Mark Lawrence. Well, actually, it leads to Mark Lawrence mentioning an altercation between Fritz Von Erich and the Great Kabuki at the Will Rogers Coliseum in Fort Worth, Texas. Fritz was blinded by the Great Kabuki and his green mist. They air a tape of David Von Erich against the Great Kabuki. They have a brawl, and Fritz Von Erich runs into the ring and attacks the Great Kabuki as David Von Erich holds off Gary Hart. Fritz puts a claw on Kabuki. Referees run out to try to stop everyone. Richard Blood comes out to try to stop Fritz. King Kong Bundy then comes out to try to break the claw off Kabuki. Fritz continues to attack on Kabuki. They come back from airing that video to Fritz and Kevin Von Erich being interviewed by Mark Lawrence. Fritz talks about his son's training at home. He believes that at one point in the future, Kerry, Kevin, or David will become world champions. Actually, he says all of them he thinks could become world champions. Fritz then talks about Gary Hart trying to run him out of wrestling. He says that he and his sons have made it a goal to run Gary Hart and others like him out of the wrestling business. Fritz says that the debt will be paid against the Great Kabuki. Kevin says he is proud of his dad. They then show highlights of Gorgeous George versus the Nature Boy from the 1950s. I don't think it was Buddy Rogers, but someone that actually wrestled just as the Nature Boy at that point in time. Armand Hussein then beats Richard Blood with a senton for the pin. Hussein does his camel walk ceremony before the match, which upsets the fans. Blood gets in some offense. Hussein misses a clothesline at Blood, but catches him with it a few seconds later, and then hits the ropes and lands a senton on Blood for the win. I think that was more just the match to fill time, as Von Erich and Irwin had ended earlier. Thought this was an okay episode. The fans in attendance were great throughout, which made the show seem like it was a bigger deal. Best match on the show was the Kevin Von Erich versus Wild Bill Irwin match. The Madril versus Zapata match was actually pretty entertaining as well. The other two matches on the show weren't particularly great. But, if you're going to watch something, give the Kevin Von Erich Wild Bill Irwin match a watch. Although I honestly, this show was just, like I said, okay. Nothing that you're going to miss out on. That's it for this review. Be sure to subscribe to the Retro Wrestling YouTube channel, and we'll be back again soon with more reviews.